This boy has a strong CCP family background, so all the adults just watch as it happens. This 17-year-old boy was done up pretty badly by several of his classmates holding what is an iron rod. They turned the lights off at the dormitory. The iron rod was about 1 foot long and had a nail in it. This video from September this year has been heavily censored by the school and in China. The brutality of them using stools, hammers, and everything else. And the video shows likely the unalived victim rolled into the ambulance. Authorities claim he's okay. I don't really know about that. And this video shows the boy is laying on a hospital bed in a state of shock from being done up in school. Now, you might think that I've cherry-picked some of these videos in China to show off bullying, but that's far from the truth. Here is a collection of the videos I've been finding of boys and girls ganging up on just one person. And this is a grade 1 student crying to her dad, telling him that she doesn't want to go to school anymore because of bullying. So what exactly is unique about the bullying situation in China? Well, it's fostered in a society where everything is about bullying. It's about strength. And it's this idea of literally taking social Darwinism for a spin. The law of the jungle is that the weakness will suffer or be preyed upon by the strong, and unfortunately, as we've come to know, the strong is always the party. I hope to try to highlight this idea that unlike other countries in East Asia, like Korea and Japan, which by the way also has massive bullying problems, in China it has formed, unfortunately, a very unique situation. Now, before we talk about the exact details, what you've come to learn from the news in recent days in China is that there's been multiple cases of indiscriminate rampage. Essentially, people trying to take up a revenge against society by harming those who are innocent or not related to the case. And you have to reflect and wonder what has caused them to do that. Well, a simple answer is if you've been bullied in school, you've been bullied by your workplace, you've been bullied throughout your life, by the way that the society has been shaped by the Chinese Communist Party. And, given the fact that you're decades away from potentially another massive movement followed by another massive political campaign where there's going to be a lot of tears and bloodshed and trouble. As you know, the pattern of the CCP is almost like every 10 years they have to do something really extreme, right? 2020 was the lockdown. 2010s, well, that was an exception. In the early 2000s, they had a massive persecution. 1989, a decade before that, Tiananmen Square massacre. And the decade before that, they just went through the Cultural Revolution. So that's why I say that China is in a very unique situation politically, and it fosters the environment of bullying. Okay, let's talk about the reasons, actually. Number one reason why bullying in China is unique is that there's zero repercussion to doing so. In Korea, for example, you have a TV show called The Glory, which highlights the problem of bullying. And you often hear Korean celebrities or K-pop idols, for that matter, being stripped of their fame or losing their status in this group after they had been accused of bullying. In China, I've never heard of a single celebrity who has been accused of bullying and fell from their fame. That's just the reality of it. Now, if those bullies happen to be kids of CCP officials in those areas, even as small as like a county official or the mayor, well, chances of them getting in trouble is even less. There were some famous cases, right? Not of young kids, but adult bullies. There's one guy, he, was involved in a traffic case where he was responsible. Instead of feeling any sense of regret, he says, my dad is Li Gang. And who was Li Gang? Well, his dad was a police chief in Beijing. So it shows you that power is almost guaranteed to be associated to the bullying behavior. And I know people in the comments are going to be like, well, David, bullying happens everywhere around the world and, people get away with it. Yeah, so there are bullying that happens in various degrees. And again, I'm not trying to discount anybody's experience of being, you've been bullied. Obviously, that feels like it's 100% of the impact. What I'm saying is in the severe cases of bullying in China, where people are being unalived or beaten to pulp, those cases are heavily censored unless it picks up public opinion steam, which doesn't happen every single time. The mentality of the school administrators is that they'd rather downplay the situation, they'd rather censor it because it makes them look really bad. Like this report here, a grade 6 female student was poked 218 times by a fellow transfer student, a guy, and the school says basically they threatened the child that this is not a category, or it doesn't categorize as bullying, and that the teachers, after finding out, says, they need to keep quiet. So the best way I can sort of differentiate between bullying in the West and in China is that bullying in China is censored in almost 99% of the cases. That one unique case, you get publicized and it suddenly kickstarts this whole sort of soul searching, so to speak. But again, there's that huge aspect of who are your parents involved. If they're just regular folks, chances of you getting anything special isn't high. But if you are the bully and your parents are CCP officials, the chance of you getting any punishment is low. And if you really think about the broader culture of the Chinese Communist Party, their international motto is bullying. Remember what happened when the Australian Prime Minister questioned the origin of COVID? Well, China launched a trade war against Australia. That's bullying. What they're doing with the bigger ships in the South China Sea against the Philippines right now, that is bullying. So when you have this government or this party at the helm of, preying on the weak, well, what could happen to the entire education system? What happens to that society that's been fueling or funding this sort of behavior for the government? Well, the people are also immersed in it. We've seen videos. Kids are taught to hate the Japanese, right? Like this video here. They're told to create hatred at a very young age. And that hate could, honestly, it can transfer to other sorts of hate. Hating your classroom mates, hating the teacher, hating other students. Again, because you're so filled with this hate since a very young age, when you grow up, what are the chances of them becoming, one of those people that take up this indiscriminate rampage against others? What if they were on the receiving end of this hate all their lives? Will they turn? A lot of those factors also extend into their adulthood. The thing about the CCP is that it starts them young, right? There's no kindness. There's no building of care. There's no building of this collective sort of compassion for people. Because guess what? It is like they literally take what Darwin says, survival of the fittest to an actual practical reality in China, right? And it starts in the classroom, because if you really think about what the classroom is, it is a projection of the real society. And then there's also the early education aspect as well. What's been happening is kids consume content on the internet. They see something about bullying. They see the methods, right, which has been dramatized for the purpose of TV. But they have no idea that that's not supposed to take place in real life. They can mimic that, and that's very possible.
往回走，我要听我茶杯打。
我在处理呢，往回走。
我不闹事，我就看一下。
回睡觉去。
他打的，他动的对吧？报警，该报警。
啥？
我说报警啊！报警！
报啥警啊？
你都被打成这样了，不报警？
我是不是处理了？
我是那
你看你这屁话咋这么多了？你是干啥的呀？
那我朋友被打了，我还
你是干啥的？我是不是处理了？
I mentioned the fault of the school administrator, right? They downplay this. Well, even Chinese state media apparently got fed up, and they even wrote about how the school administrators do this sort of cold operation on how bullying works to try to downplay it, or to effectively say that it's not happening so frequently. But the data in China suggests otherwise. According to one set of studies, between the ages of middle school and elementary school in this study is about 32.4%, which is 1/3 of students experience bullying, right? And that's again because we can't really count on Chinese data, or that some kids maybe they're not reporting what's going on. So that number could actually be much higher. And of course, we always have to take what the CCP says with a grain of salt. If they're really trying to address the problem, it would have been done already. It's a one-party system, right? Something they want to do, they've already done it. Now, this is one important case. On October 12th, an 18-year-old senior was offed in the school in Sichuan province. The parents suspected that the child was a victim of bullying. And so an insider apparently says that the child had bruises, and the school strictly blocked the news, didn't allow photography at the time. The school denied those allegations of bullying, just said that there were, wounds around the neck from the offing, otherwise nothing else. But the photos here show a different story. Clearly, she was bullied. And with every single case in China, the victim's family, if they try to make this a bigger deal than it is, if they try to, publicize what's going on, they get threatened by the authorities, by the police, saying that if you dare to speak out, you will lose any compensation, right? So a lot of times families have no choice but to take whatever they're given for compensation and just remain silent about what really went on. And also in China, when you commit a serious crime, but you're under the age of 14, the chance of you being prosecuted for a criminal charge is low. Now, there are exceptional cases, of course, but that's generally speaking, if you're under the age of 14, you're not going to be criminally prosecuted. Now that I'm not saying that severe cases of physical bullying doesn't happen, or severe cases of mental bullying doesn't happen in other countries, but I'm saying that based on the videos that I've seen, the methods which these kids are using is quite brutal. And this might not just be even a China-only issue. It might be an East Asia part of issue. But the cases here is that part of what they're learning is done by the teacher as well. Because what the teachers are doing in the classroom is they're also part of this abuse, right? We see videos of this. I'll try to show them, but again, the censorship stuff. So kids learn from the teachers too. They learn from, if they have problematic homes, and they learn from that as well. And kids are very susceptible to this type of mimicking. So the extreme cases was brought back into attention last year when 3 boys at the age of 13 unalived their classmate. And they're what's called left behind boys, or, because their parents work out of town as migrant workers, they're not really getting a lot of that family educational connection. They live with their grandparents. Maybe they don't have the time to really look after them. So these kids just kind of run wild. And unfortunately, the classmate was bullied, and then the 3 of them decided to unalive him. They buried him in an abandoned garden, and the whole case really shook China, right? A lot of articles are saying, well, China needs to look within and see why these cases are happening. And in this particular case, the 3 kids did get prosecuted for charges above the age of 14 because they didn't have any special family backgrounds. They were just regular kids. So they got charged. But if any of them were, offsprings of CCP officials, they wouldn't have been charged. Okay, let me talk about my childhood in China. I wasn't bullied in elementary school because for a few reasons. First, I was taken care of. Now, in China, there's something called a walk the back door, which is basically you invite the teacher to have dinner with your parents, and you treat them to dinner and say, take care of my kid, right? It's a very common thing in China. Almost all the parents do this. Some of the parents, unfortunately, don't have the financial means to do that, or maybe they don't have the time to do that. And so the teachers really take less care of the kid. It's a very common thing, right? It's not like something that is like so bizarre in China. It's a very common thing. And that was one of the reasons. The second reason was because in China, in the school classrooms, you have these organizations of the CCP called the Young Pioneers, where you wear the red scarf. I was the committee member on athleticism, so I was like a little CCP official when I was young. So yeah, like the class president is also the top CCP member of that classroom. So those positions, you rarely get bullied because the teachers look after you, right? You're like the little politician of the class. If you're a kid from out of town, or if you have a single parent, or if you're less advantage, like you have a disadvantage in, you're not financially doing well or anything of those sorts of things, right? Then that makes you the target of bullying. So in schools, they've already created this hierarchy within which teacher is taking care of who. If you're studying well or if you don't study well, these are pretty typical, right? But it's, again, like I said, because of all of the reasons in that unique society, it makes things much worse. Another reason is this happens more frequently in the rural area where the education system is not as adequate. There's no anti-bullying seminar trainings for teachers or anti-bullying speakers for students to go to. So naturally, the only source of education is whatever they learn in class and whatever they got at home. And that's why a lot of these videos that I showed you are also from rural areas, because simply, it's just not as prestigious of a school. And in a classroom, Chinese classrooms are huge. They have 100 kids or 80 kids. So there's a hyper competition starting at grade 1, because the only measurement of success in Chinese classrooms are test scores. So if you score, 90s, right, you're a smart student. If you have 7 other classmates who also got the same score as you, there's jealousy involved. You're told to compete. A lot of these human nature stuff are very exposed to the kids at a very young age as well. And last but not least is the role of the teacher. I spoke with some colleagues who went to elementary school in the 70s. And they're telling me how teachers back then really truly cared for the students. If you didn't have food to eat, they would invite you to their house to feed you dinner, took extra hours after class to teach you something you didn't know. But teachers in China today, they no longer are bound by that moral aspect of the teaching profession. They're hitting kids, they're doing all sorts of things. And when a teacher who is supposed to be the role model is not correct, and I think this again is not common it's very common around the world, which is teachers frankly don't want to deal with bullying situations, which is kind of sad. You do have 1 or 2 teachers who try to do it, but over time, I think people lose this sense of justice. And like I mentioned, the teachers are kind of corrupt in in China as well. Again, I'll refer you to Aini, who does a more of a data-based look on bullying in East Asia, so Japan, South Korea, and China. But one point I do disagree with her is how data is reported in China, right? We obviously understand they underplay a lot of their issues. So data reporting is something that we shouldn't take at face value when it comes to China. So other than that, I really think this whole bullying issue is one where it's very complicated. But if you look at it as a societal trend, then it makes it much easier to understand why bullying in China is such a difficult thing to tackle, but also something that's very severe. And like I mentioned, what's going to happen to those people who are bullied when they grow up, if they feel like they've been attacked by society all their entire life? Will they become the next person to indiscriminately take revenge against society? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I would love to hear what you think about this topic. If you enjoyed it, also subscribe to our channel and like this video. All right, until next time, bye-bye.